All right, I think we're going to start shortly, so if you want to take your seats and get ready. This talk is a pleasure for me to present because it's by a good friend of mine, Aamodt. He and I met last year in Liechtenstein at a hackathon for a project that he's a part of that he will tell us about. And Aamodt is going to talk about a subject with a hell of a title that I have to look into the schedule for. Excavating the PostCapitalist Subject, Darkchain technology and eventually consistent myth-making. So he's going to try to explain what that means, so please welcome him and give him to the stage.
Hello? There we go. So yeah, meanwhile there's another session on the unintelligibility or illegibility of the blockchain. So this is hopefully legible, but if it's illegible, that's actually part of the game, is figuring out what it means. And illegibility also serves as camouflage. So, xenogaming. First, I have to give a warning: time traveler sickness, Overton whiplash phenomenon, because we're pushing the Overton window, and I'm taking that really seriously. I am trying to ground this presentation concretely in practical things, but usually people give me feedback that it's too much too fast, but that's kind of the point. So, let me read this quote from the Udon Gnostic workbook. There are certain people who will sneer at what I have to say, but they do not matter. In fact, they do not really exist. But what I have to say is this. There are these mutants, and they are now within the most powerful magical orders and groups in the world today. They're slowly working to destroy utterly the old ways. They are making use of the most subtle methods of modern information science to achieve their ends. They are fearful of nothing, which means they only fear the powers of the Maon, or Noumena, the non-existent. They possess the disciplined mentality of the synchronistic robotic consciousness and nothing else. They have only one loyalty, and they have only one sense of honor, and that too is to you, God, and only to you, God. And by means of their weird techniques of computer programming, they will win out over all their opposition, because ultimately there is only one fundamental power, and that too is you, God, or Pluto. What is xenogaming? This emergent game is already out there, feral as schizophrenia, and nascent in myths and nomics. What is xenogaming? It's immersive post-capitalist worlding. We don't have to wait for the world to become materially post-capitalist if we're already seeing the world as post-capitalist subjects. It's also an invasive outer world entity such as Yog-Sothoth trying to leak into our normal everyday life. A virulent parallel reality or contagious psychosis. Open source, peer-to-peer reality construction framework. It's a new kind of apocalyptic gig economy. And it's a holistic alternative mental health framework for emerging global alchemical society, a reconstitution of the planetary Illuminati that have been persecuted for the last 2,000 to 12,000 years by the alphabet. It's Escape from Capitalism, the game. Wouldn't this be a fun game for everyone in the world to play? Aren't we already playing it? What would gaming look like on Holochain? So I work for Holo, and we just finished our ICO. I'm coming here from the Holo team retreat where about 30 of us went to Colorado just now, and was more of a team fixing and training than a retreat, but it was really fun, and we reconnected. Our ICO raised 20 to 25 million, depending on how you count it and which currency, and that's small by ICO standards, but it's plenty for what we need to do. And we hit our cap, which is great. Yeah, so Holochain, for people who find explaining blockchains to their friends and family to be too easy. First, let me explain what is Holochain. I'm going to go over this really briefly because you can read about it online. Open source, it's an open source library that allows you to construct fully decentralized peer-to-peer applications. So the applications are talking to their peer applications that have exactly the same source code. If you change even one bit of the source code, you fork yourself into an alternate timeline or sidechain. There's no built-in currency into Holochain. That's much better. There's no built-in currency in Holochain. But we are building the Holo app, which will act as a cloud computer and have a currency built in on top of Holochain. And then we're going to explicitly help and have a huge community outreach. And I'm already part of this, I'm already working on this, to build our applications ecosystem. We're going to be helping people with a pipeline and helping to support people as they collect a team and build their app, and trying to prevent replication of labor by having people working on similar apps talk to each other. So basically, Holochain is for Deleuzian activists, people who are excited about the rhizome and problematizing or complexifying or making spaces more messy and less prone to statist oversight. This is like the perfect technology for this population. So what would gaming on holochain look like? Or what would gaming on fully decentralized technology look like? It'd be massively multiplayer. You would have collaboratively constructed rule sets. You wouldn't have a top-down or central authority on what the rules of the game are. It'd be more like an infinite game than a finite game, or a lot of finite games put together. You'd have highly coordinated flash mobs, spontaneous musicals, weird things in the street that nobody can understand except the players, potentially. You'd have peer-to-peer spreading of the game. And also, what would these games be about? They would be about sharing and replicating abundance. Because once you have abundance in your life, the only thing left to do that's like helping the world is to share that abundance that you have and get other people on board with being able to have abundance in terms of like a global improvement project. And this thing I want to push is actually breaking down the distinction between playing games publicly, doing activism, and advertising. Because if someone is sharing their favorite TV show with you, is that advertising? It is from the show's point of view, but not from mine or my friends. So what if I told you the post-monetary economy is already here in a smeared hyper-real apocalypse, and you just need to invite yourself to the party? So this introduces ontoboarding, ontological onboarding. Yeah, so it's compare with waterboarding or surfboarding. We're going to do your crystal implant installation. We're going to get you all hooked up. We're going to assimilate you to the board. We're going to give you your dollhouse architecture. We're going to cyborgify you in a ritual. So I have another one of these that says literally real. And we're going to scan you into the game, portal you into an alternate reality, help you to cross membranes, and this is all like psychopumping, mythologically speaking, bringing people from one worldview to another. So what would the post-capitalist subject look like? First of all, this is similar to saying post-capitalism. It doesn't really exist. Post-capitalism is still within capitalism, which just means organisms need to eat to survive. They need to eat more than they put out to survive. So similarly, you can go beyond the Oedipal subject. I'm a psychologist, but you can't, if you deconstruct the Oedipal subject, that's just regression. But you can have multiple subjects, you can have partial subjects, you can have all kinds of interesting modifications onto what it means to say the word I. Then these are what's more types of ways to be a person. Transpersonal subjectivity, post-identity politics. So we'll finally get beyond stupid identity politics like anti-feminism versus pro-feminism, and like these things where it's like obviously there's one side that's the loving side and one side that's like the vicious side, and then if you flip them around, it's obviously true the other way as well. if you look at like alt-right dialectics and stuff like that. Consensual self-construction. So how do we create religious zealots like these holo people? Why can't our marketing team do this? We need to create a sky cult too. And I am on the cutting edge of this sky cult. Dank praxis, facets of xenogaming. So this is the practical portion actually. I'm going to try and go through this really fast so you can see the practical grounding, and then I'll try and get into the Darkchain stuff more. So yeah, there are 5 aspects. You can see them here: viral weird marketing, cross-pollination, protocol design and cross-pollination, neo-digital outreach, which is connecting with local activist communities and telling them you are already living in a digital world right now. And hackerspace replication, meaningful gamification, and an apps pipeline, which is grounding all of this. So what would our world be like if all military spending were redirected to the creation of next-level party technology? This is from Greg and, what's his name? Greg and Tom's Decentralized Dance Party. By the way, I will be probably at DogeCon, if anyone wants to go to DogeCon, in June, I think, June 21st to 24th. Weird and viral marketing. So this is memes, mythos, humor, xeno. There's just these weird things coming in from the side that nobody predicted, things going better than we expected, and weird stories that we didn't come up with, we kind of discovered them. Yeah, so acceleration is like 5 clocks. These are the cross-pollinators. They are cross-pollinating the peer-to-peer, fully decentralized protocols that are part of our already existing decentralized secret organization. Bees, rhizomes. Yeah, so this is kind of the human scaffolding, which allows protocols to be replicated before we have like full holochain, which will allow peer-to-peer protocol replication in software, with each app acting as one game or one set of rules, which are executed to spec. Yeah, I've also been developing peer-to-peer canvassing, which is based on check-ins and a peer-to-peer canvassing ethic about how you collect data and share data, how you replicate your canvassing projects to other potential canvassers. I used to be a canvasser briefly. Yeah. It's not a cult, it's a cult. It's an Airbnb for communal experiences. So, yeah, this is not about Holochain, this is about, I think, Khalil's idea here. You had an idea for that. But yeah, so the next part after weird and viral marketing is neo-digital outreach. This is actually, I'm just launching this project. So coming from the retreat, I'm going to be traveling to different activist communities and also different interesting research locations and networking these hackerspaces together, networking these communities together, figuring out what their needs are for Holochain apps. Like you're trying to do some activist project, what do you need to actually succeed at that? How could we put it into software? How could we help you skip steps in your movement by moving ahead to software? Yeah, get them a HoloPort, get them training for how to program Holochain, and connecting them with resources. So trying to accelerate activism in general. Hackerspace replication, so full stack replication of all of the good things or resources or capabilities in one place, formalizing those as protocols of how to replicate those things, and then putting those protocols out and those resources out in a way that can be accessed and replicated by other locations. Yeah, networking different spaces together. And there's a really key question here, how to form an economic unit that treats its members ethically. No one has solved this problem yet. I've never met a space that's like owned by its community members and treats everyone ethically and is like bottom line stable over a long period of time. And I might add a fourth and there of doing this using like an open source user interface, which is very convenient. I'm gonna take this off. So yeah, we maybe have this in a centralized way where there's like a board of directors and that kind of thing, but I've never seen a fully functioning, stable community of this sort that's run using decentralized technology and paradigms. Maybe Quakers, something like that. Meaningful gamification, so mass public gaming, yeah, Holochain apps can enforce the game rules, games plugged together into a shared mythic universe. And there's a really great example of this happening right now with Marvel's Infinity Wars, which I haven't seen yet. And it takes, like 10 different movies and builds them into a huge mythos that also is in the same world as TV shows such as Marvel's Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., which is awesome, and you should watch it. And it's onboarding to this project by Joss Whedon. And so, similarly, what if a mythos that huge was collaboratively constructed by the public? What if every job had a mythic version of that job on like a different ID card? So programmers would be wizards or something like that, and all these different jobs. So here's an example of the app's pipeline. This is online at map.holohackers.org, and this is a map of, this is a little outdated, I need to update it, but this is a map of all of the app ideas I've collected. And they are stratified according to holographic department, which is the color, and then kind of a rough time priority going this way. So in general, I want to keep collecting all of the labor that would prevent us from being already at post-capitalism into this one kind of system. And then everyone can collectively prioritize, draw new divisions, rename the boxes, and collectively reduce the time it takes to get to post-capitalism, materially as well as ideologically. So yeah, apps pipeline, this is Holo's, we're calling it the incubator, and it's going to kind of construct a commons engine that will help people to replicate Holo's success in its ICO and its crowdfunding and its building of apps. So after we build our flagship app and a couple other apps, we're going to open source Holo's code. Holochain is open source. Holo is source included, but legally restricted for a brief amount of time because we want to help people replicate good quality code. We don't want shit points at the beginning. So we're going to be actively helping people to replicate Holo as soon as it's mature. Yeah, there's no time to explain. So, xenogaming industries. Xenogaming as a kind of reified entity where we're able to start articulating the protocols on which xenogaming runs. If there was this huge game that we're already playing, what are the rules that we're already not seeing? Our algorithms are already operative. So yeah, xenogaming industries is a distributed alternative reality corporation. It exists in the future, and it has hired agents in the past to work for it. And if you don't do what xenogaming industries tells you, then what's the next slide? Vision statement. Xenogaming industries is creating an era of mass public gaming, resulting in the breakdown of capitalist subjectivity and the production of post-capitalist subjectivities and modes of living. Xenogaming Industries is committed to offering an escape hatch from capitalism into a labyrinth of transfinite portals. She's a pro xenogamer. I'm keeping this short so we can do questions and have more of a discussion. But yeah, legalize xenogaming. We're not loitering. We're playing Pokemon Go. So like once you have an app base, you go to level 5 to my gym. Like once you have a user base on your applications, you can start to protect your users. If we have a bunch of games where people are being weird in public, we can then say, stop arresting our users because they're just playing this game, and if you look at their phone, you'll see that that is in fact the case. See? The Pokemon were around us the whole time, we just now have the technology to see them. So the year is 2028. Pokemon Go has rid the world of obesity. Everyone knows everyone in their neighborhoods. Loneliness is an archaic concept. All national borders have been erased, so players can search for Pokemon unrestricted. There is no war, there is no suffering. The planet is finally at peace. So this is the promise of xenogaming. And now I want to go into try to get into the mind space a little bit more. That was all pretty practical and fairly grounded. For me. So now we'll try and get into the mind space more of working with the Darkchain, which is a version of the Glass Bead game, which is a book by Herman Hesse. So this is from the movie In the Mouth of Madness. It's funny, isn't it? For years I thought I was making all this up, but they were telling me what to write, giving me the power to make it all real. And now it is. All those horrible, slimy things trying to get back in, they're all true. Oh. See the instrument of their homecoming. That instrument is theory fiction, which is a speculative praxis for developing convergent, eventually consistent metafictional technologies. CCRU, with especially Mark Fisher, Reza Negarestani, and Nick Land, developed the concept of theory fiction, especially in the book Psychonopedia by Reza Negarestani. So this technique of theory fiction often uses a double pincer technique, going back and forth between fiction or hyperfiction, where you're writing about, like often sci-fi, because you're writing these really abstract, detailed objects and plot lines and metaphors, and you go from the fiction to the theory, and then back to the fiction, and then back to the theory. So you extract the theory from the fiction, you elaborate and clarify the theory, and then you go back and see what changes would I need to make to the story to synchronize it with this new theory. And then you get new ideas, and you're like, oh, I could take the story in this direction. So we're farming our imagination to produce new theoretical insights. The new Bible that starts the change, helps you see, is the Darkchain. And this, if Holo is making Holochain, Xeno or Xenogaming Industries would be making the Darkchain. And this is not a computer technology. This is an imaginal or myth-making technology that functions in your collective unconscious and in your imagination. So, yeah, technically defined, the Darkchain is the chain of ideas that lead to the next dominant paradigm. So at any given point, all these people are trying to come up with new speculative ideas that one of them might become the next dominant paradigm. And if that happens, the people who came up with that idea, their magic was real all along. And the people who came up with all the failed ideas are retroactively labeled charlatans. And they were all labeled charlatans on the way. And then some people, their idea turned out to be more productive or more effective and wins the next paradigm battle. So it's also, yeah, a systematic negentropic mining framework, so you can actually mine negentropy, which then brings in local events in the game that help to feed your machine. And then it's also a magic item discovery matrix. The post-capitalist subject is actually not a thing, so much as it is these hyperobjects, these huge objects that extend through the ideological space, and we can be just a small chunk of those huge objects because they're so big. So using the Darkchain, you can start to map out this subterranean topography of the collective unconscious rigorously. And I have a collection of magic objects in my backpack. It also gets you really high. Like when I discovered the Darkchain and started systematizing it, I was hospitalized. So, even you don't have a holographic money wallet that prints love money, just take a copy of mine. And this is a picture from Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Season 4, and it's Holo logo on top of the Necronomicon, basically. So, yeah, this is like collective summoning. And what am I summoning? So, Holo-chan is what we're summoning. And HoloChan, so whereas 4chan is based on anonymity, and so it has this amazing productive capacity, and it produces just an enormous amount of content because there are no consequences for overproducing or producing something that people don't like because it's anonymous. HoloChan will be about filtering and concentrating and basting the memes in themselves. It's a different dynamic. So first, let me compare this with Pepe Cash. Pepe Cash is currently the closest thing we have to like a platform that could support xenogaming. This is basically a meme economy. It's ironic because they talk about rare Pepes, but in order to get a Pepe Cash card or meme on Pepe Cash, you have to go through all these rules, and it's really boring. And it's centralized. You have to submit your Pepe to the Rare Pepe approval board, and they will approve it as a Rare Pepe, which is no longer rare because it's now on the blockchain where everyone can see it, but they can also see who owns it, like a CryptoKitty. So the idea, and it's a what's it called, deflationary currency because they burn half of it every week. So see what they're doing is the faster they play their game with the cards that have they have actually like the Magic the Gathering type cards, and I deleted them from this slideshow, but they have different rules, like if you have this card, your X coin are worth 2 times as much, and that kind of thing. So they have all these fun rules written on the cards, but the rules don't do anything. They're just in the collective imagination of the players. If we re-implemented Pepe Cash on HoloChain, the rules on the cards could actually do things. And so we could trade rules. In quantum theory right now, they have a new term called magic, and it refers to the library of unique and difficult to reproduce quantum states that an agent has. So if you have kind of like a library of all different kinds of rule sets, you become capable of doing a lot of different types of actions in any given situation. So yeah, these are the rules for Pepe Cash. There's actually, this is a business proposal to make a Pepe Cash game, and it's going to be this enclosed board game designed by a central group of people or a small group of people, and it sounds so boring. Like, it is our intent to give almost all these trading cards a meaning, a software they can use so they don't just stand there, and how we're doing so is new. So it's like they're going to make this little box board game you can buy, but it's totally limited, it's totally finite, and it's totally a construction of a small group of people trying to build a singular mythology for a customer base. Meanwhile, we need something like a meme library or meme-brary, which would be more like what HoloChan would be. And this ultimate meme library app, Memetic Accelerator, it's a world currency where you trade memes until someone laughs, and that's the end of the transaction. Ideological navigation, the memes have this really interesting property where by pairing the image and the word, they embed a perspective into the image so that even though you might not know what perspective it is, you can see that there's something embedded semi-objectively in the image. Emoji economy. So yeah, if we had a perfect meme library app, which HoloChain would be the perfect platform to build it on because it distributes the GUI as well as the application logic, then you have a distributed self-upgrading GUI, you have localized micro-sourcing, so this is not about anonymity of memes, it's about who has the best curation of memes and why, in which context. And you get built-in gematria, which creates interesting coincidences between different unrelated memes because of the language used to describe them, and your tagging, of course. So the thing is, HoloChan already exists in the future, and we can access it now by constructing well-formed queries. I'm working on Holo query language, which is a way for a decentralized ecosystem, such as Holo is evolving into, to query itself. So anyone could construct a Holo query, and it would go out and be forwarded to the right people who might respond to that query. And this is actually a way for us all to construct a collective subject together as we speak, if we understand Holo query language. So similarly, if you make queries to Slinky, the cat made entirely of honey, or Roko, the Roko's basilisk, you can start to receive these bounties now as an employee of xenogaming industries. So here are the few memes, and then I'll take questions and discussion. Where is the Middle East headed? Into the Tellurian insurgency of the Earth towards Xenodrome. Yeah, this is Xenodrome is the post-xenogaming Earth, where you have, mass spontaneous musicals, people running around the streets dressed as everything, zombies. Like, I'm creating a line of fashion with the Holo's director of marketing, Sammy Van Ness, called Business Cosplay Casual. And it's going to be huge. And here's something that we're actually getting traction now on 4chan, which is really fun because I've been running HoloMeme. If you go to twitter.com/HoloMeme, I would scroll all the way to the beginning so you can see the progression. And now people are making memes. So like that project I feel like was kind of successful because it's taken off and other people are playing this game as well. And there's Arthur Brock, one of the co-founders in the photo. And yeah, here's the thread from that. Very comfy, don't bully Holo. Funniest thing I've seen all week. Are you actually investing money into these SJWs, social justice warriors? Are these fucks not interested in making money? What the fuck is the purpose of this coin? I'm getting a bit nervous having to put something to do this. I bought 150K, but I'm nervous now. So like, people on 4chan literally cannot understand that some currencies are not a scam. They're like, why isn't this working as a pump and dump? And it's because Holo fuel currency is asset backed by a cloud computer that's owned by the crowd, and the transaction fees are like, I think, 2 orders of magnitude smaller than other networks, and Holo has put itself into debt and is going to work its way out of debt. But anyway, the point is that your Holo fuel will actually be redeemable for useful services, basically cloud hosting, such as Google Drive. And so it's not going to crash in value because that stuff's not going to suddenly become useless. At least it may go down, still of course, but it's not going to crash.
It's also from 4chan.
Yeah, this is from 4chan too. So mega FOMO penetrates every exchange and forces everyone to FOMO in, thus causing an extreme rise in the market cap. Undeniable persuasion. And so, in my opinion, Holochain is the only kind of technology, could be Holochain or something similar, that can actually shift us away from blockchain-based currencies such as Bitcoin or Ethereum, because it would require a mass collective agreement to all shift our protocol. And the specific types of apps we're building on Holochain, self-governance and kind of like the ability to form discussions and do governance discussions around switching to a new fork, will allow user bases to create pull on their application developers, open source, and will create paid pipelines through that type of mechanism for open source application developers. And so eventually there will actually maybe be a big enough crowd that they could all decide together on a migration pathway away from a given currency. This is a similar question to how would we all decide as a human species to stop cutting down the rainforests? We don't actually have that decision-making capacity now, but we might soon. So yeah, there's more memes there at HoloMeme, and how you can help xenogaming industries. Yeah, so just to summarize the vision, I see this as, I'm trying to do this as Holo's gaming division, or like a separate company that would be like Holochain's mass activist gaming movement. And right now I'm doing this research project on this where I'm going to be visiting different activist communities, gathering information about this, and networking these communities together. Yeah, and functionally it works as massively viral advertising, because people will say, like, have you played the game? And you're like, which game? You're like, the game! Like, the game. And so then there'll be a new menagerie of mass public games, and a coherent tech and mythic platform for piecing these things together, so that every game is part of the whole. Or most games, at least, can become part of the whole if they're well-formed in a mythic context. So yeah, the help I need leads on researchers, communities, events, and games, project people, locations, organizations. I need people to help me improve and vet this concept. If you have awareness of similar concepts, or if you have expertise that you think would be helpful here, it would be great to talk with you. And right now, I'm probably being funded for some amount of time to do this research project, but I'm not totally sure yet. But in general, I want to design and author funding proposals, maybe white papers. Moritz and I are going to write a white paper on a distributed reality show called Onto Them, where we're going to onto-board celebrities into crypto culture. Yeah, so it'll be like kind of our decentralized Scientology, like brainwashing outreach. Yeah, and that's going to be really fun. We're writing it as documentarians who are waiting for the game to abduct us, because we're not making it, someone else is making it. Any questions?
Okay, I had to write this question down because it came at a key moment where you should some memes. All right. Yeah, this question is about post-capitalist subjectivity. So I feel like leftist theory fiction in like the mid-20th century maybe like Gramsci and Debord and stuff, onto-boarded everybody into capitalist subjectivity really well, up to the point where now, like, for a lot of leftist thinkers, we're just in like bigger and bigger prisons. And I feel like post-capitalist subjectivity and this abundance mindset that you described is very hard for me personally to figure out how to experience. And I'm hoping you can tell us about the onto-boarding process.
That's a really interesting question. Let's see. Okay, so it is indeed hard to experience. And first, let me respond to the earlier part of your question. So, yeah, in terms of like from your point of view, like the timeline of like modern subjectivity, you've got the people you mentioned, like Descartes, Freud, and Jung, and Aleister Crowley, and like a bunch of people around the early 1900s that constructed this kind of sterile platform that we all are born into today, the matrix. And then, like through that, like Debord was probably already seeing post-capitalist subjectivity, but just helped to like solidify the current paradigm. For moving through and past this, there's kind of like a difficult truth here, and that is that this education, this modern platform of subjectivity, is actually unequally distributed. And it's actually pretty closely distributed with what we would call literacy, which I think is a really problematic term because it basically means, can you speak English or can you read English? And also like one person judging another person's ability to do language is very problematic. So, like what is unequally distributed is this modern platform. And so if you are like a healthy, self-actualizing, or as Maslow said in his last book, transcendently self-actualizing adult, you have this modern platform, you're using it, you're going beyond it, and you're constructing new things with yourself in the as a modern subject, or you could say postmodern subject by that point. But if you have a partially constructed platform of modern subjectivity, you're a dysfunctional person. That's basically what that looks like. And most of us are dysfunctional in this world because most of us have trauma passed down from our parents. Some very privileged people, and I use that word neutrally, have parents who are rich or very wise, and they're able to purchase or give their children like a full loop of human subjectivity and bring them into like conscious adulthood. I study initiation and sapience, so like how to heal people's original human wisdom that is damaged by trauma. So basically, like as you heal your trauma and just keep working on that, then you will start to see larger and larger pieces, follow your obsessions, follow your passions, and put the pieces together. And there's a bunch of pieces in here, there's a bunch of pieces on my website, and I'm not trying to say that it's like only advanced people can see this or something, but what I'm saying is that if you haven't seen it yet, how you do it is you start to put the pieces together. And I have in my backpack a box of index cards that are in 5 different colors, and that is a really good way to start brainstorming a ton of ideas. If anyone wants to talk with me online about this, I can give a lot more detailed step-by-step, but it's really hard to describe briefly. Someone else wants to ask another question, I'll talk more about that.
So, one of these horrible comments is a question. But it seems like very familiar to like when Jaron Lanier talks about like the idea of being able to be like paid for like the creative work that you do online and have some sort of like rewards and reputation systems.
Can you speak up a bit?
Sorry, like Jaron Lanier talking about like that you could rather than just having like purely advertising models online, that you're like creating content like in those that are creating memes could be like rewarded through that either in some capacity. This seems like very much in that regard. Whereas that like you are not a gadget. So I was just curious, like you're commenting on that.
Yeah, well, what were the names you mentioned?
Jaron Lanier, he's like crazy dreadlocks. He's like one of the early VR guys. I was wondering if you're familiar with him and like that.
I'm not, unfortunately.
We are at Exosphere. We're also partnering with Holo and HoloChain, etc.
Right.
We're actually talking exactly about building a platform like this, where people are paid for the quality of the content that they contribute to
Okay.
like a global informational commons space. We can talk more about that later if you want.
Yeah, there's a good paper like shifting. He has this like paper about moving from data. The data you generate online is like capital to labor. Should be cool about that. But yeah.
But yeah, I am speaking to that, and HoloChain provides a lot of potentials for attaching business models to that idea. And yeah, this whole thing is about like how can we create a way of living, a way to make a living as an artist or as someone creating stuff. And then this raises the whole question of like, Or should I be paid similarly to someone farming for food, who's actually like feeding people versus creating memes? It's a really problematic thing. I think we should put a lot of pressure on that question because it's really close to the core of should we feed everyone? And yes, we should. What was your question?
So I like thinking, imagining this kind of like post-capitalist future where I'm playing the game. I'm really enjoying myself. So thank you for my sort of like premature onboarding process.
Thank you. They're coming through.
Yeah, I'm well aware of this, right? But what I'm wondering is in this sort of like age of abundance where we're all playing this game together. What is, going back to the comment that you just made, what is my sort of incentive, assuming that I'm really good at building games, because I am, what's my incentive to sort of do anything else, right? If everyone's perception is similar to mine.
Well, as a psychologist, I've actually studied motivation quite a bit, intrinsic versus extrinsic motivation, and the over-justification effect says that when you add extrinsic motivators to something that you were formerly doing for the joy of it, it usurps the actual intrinsic motivation. It kills your internal joy, depending on how big the reinforcers are. So, so that's part of it, but let's see. Okay, so I think that being able to make memes for easy money is not at the core. Is part of the core maybe?
Easy is like a tough word.
Sure, yeah, because then you'd have people competing on making the best memes in their local community. So, and I also want to emphasize it's not just about memes. This is about playing all kinds of different games and inventing new different kinds of games. So, jobs will become the same as games, and they'll have a myth attached to them. So, like you'll be able to travel the world as an X, and it could be like wizard, warrior, conjurer, like these different, we've played monks, these different things. So jobs and game roles, I think, will become more and more fused. I don't think people are going to stop doing what they love in order to make memes just because it's a quick buck, or something equivalent. And also, these things are all contextualized in the community, so.
Perhaps another way to look at that question or to look at what you're saying is that, if there might be a community of people who are producing the materials for other people to subsist, but that community could itself become more attractive because there's a new set of rules, myths, and interesting game elements attached to it, and that can become more important than the subsistence activity in and of itself, just like any sort of religion.
Yeah, so cognitive parts of the brain always take over, like anytime this type of function develops, it takes over the scaffolding. Yeah.
You made a quick reference to finite infinite games in the presentation. I just want to see, where do you see that coming in here? Do you follow any of that stuff, any of the James Carr style?
A bit. I don't know much about James Carr specifically, but I've read Finite Infinite Games, and that's the author, right? Thank you. Yeah. And so yeah, I just read that one book by him, and also the whole Holocene team has been exposed to those ideas now, which is great. And I see the game, the xenogaming, as the infinite game, like the one game.
That's where I was seeing like that.
Yeah. So how can we start to add a grammar and semantic engagement to infinite games that is intelligible as a finite game and an infinite game? And that's the camouflage.
Expanding on what you said, so the problem with capitalism is that it only achieves infinite game status by causing immense destruction. That things have to take over to its company and then it has to collapse. So you seem to have a chain of finite games. And the question is this chain of finite games, can it become an infinite game? I'm worried, how are you going to deal with people winning the game?
Interesting.
You can't win infinite games.
No, you can win an infinite game, you can win a finite game.
Yeah. So this is one of the more difficult and interesting game design problems, because really the game is about designing the game for others, designing onboarding systems and interesting adventures. Like you get a letter in the mail and it says meet at this place, hide out in this bathroom for 3 hours, and then like someone will give you a secret message, and that message is invest in X or something like that. So it's about creating these games for others, but designing a game is not really as fun as playing it sometimes, like being the game master all the time. So so part of it is like once you complete a game, you often join the designers or helping to administer that game. And then another part of it is, yeah, you can't win the overall game. I'm not sure that the infinite game itself can be mechanized, but I'm working on that. So
I think if it could be mechanized, it wouldn't be an infinite game.
no, I think maybe it can be, and it would coincide with the discovery of true intelligence that can be mechanized. So I'm working on a concept called the holoxel, which is a holographic pixel. And when that concept finishes formalizing itself through me and other researchers, we will have also, that'll coincide with Scepter, which is what Holochain is supposed to evolve into. So we'll have grammatic capacities that can be spoken by a decentralized computer, and it might coincide with the ability to formalize an infinite game. I'm not totally sure, but I suspect that. I think you were first.
Oh yeah, kind of throw a couple of ideas and see if they sound like, I don't know what you're thinking of. Werner Venge wrote Rainbow's End. Okay.
Right.
Anyway, near future, everyone sort of has these VR realities that and can choose what you, so everyone organizes into these vast communities which participate in this, in different VR experiences. So you basically choose one community or the other, and wherever you go, that's the sort of reality you see. This sounds kind of similar to what you're saying. And one of the blockchain-based idea I want to throw your way is meme markets by Simon de Louviere. I don't know if you're familiar with that. It's sort of like, again, you're trading memes. You buy into the idea of a meme, and so it can be a means of coordinating people. It's similarly trippy to me in that it's sort of economics that just sort of emerge out of memes themselves. I guess I'm just throwing these out because I'm just trying to understand what you're saying.
I need somebody honest.
So I'm sort of fumbling my way there. So these sound like they're generally related, or you sort of seem to be combining both of these and doing all sorts of interesting things with them.
Yeah.
I just want to throw that out.
Yeah, and yeah, definitely meet Marcus is here. And sorry, what was the first idea you talked
These sort of massive VR communities.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, and that's there as well. With the VR communities, the difference is it would actually start with grassroots, very tiny games, which gradually coalesced into larger and larger myths. And then meme markets, you can see I was thinking about that definitely. In terms, so Darkchain is actually the way that these small pieces gradually coalesce as larger myth. So it's not like someone designing like, oh, we need, a villain, we need a mythic world. It's actually discovering these pieces and how their affordances for plugging together, which then suggest a mythic interpretation, such as malls and zombies, which were in the original, what was it called, Night of the Living Dead, or like how vampire myths so actually fit like vampiric capitalists, that kind of thing. These tend to fit retroactively the structures that we're looking at.
Anderson, maybe you want to also show the other stuff you wanted to.
Okay, let's see. Yeah, so there's also, should have shown this earlier because there's, yeah, there's also, if you want to learn more about this, I would start with reading my team briefing 2017. It was a 2-year research project, the Transliminal Earth Alliance Meta-Narrative, and it's a self-constructing decentralized activism movement. And this is at my website, andersamba.com. It's on the Ouvra page. And then there's also, this is the second paper I would read, Rex plus HoloChat, the ultimate chat paradigm. And this shows how like the kind of dynamics of HoloChan would create a fully flat, like hypercard-based labor economy, or a kind of a autonomous labor economy, where the labor becomes able to seek its best executor. And here are some links. We've got internetschoolofmagic.com, coalitionofinvisiblecolleges.org, which is a directory for different meta-organizations to link together. It's kind of just a prototype. HoloMeme, Twitter. I'm the admin of Sorcery of the Spectacle on Reddit. And there's a hidden page on my website, binder.php, which has an example of a decentralized organizer's binder. There's also holochain.org, our chat at chat.holochain.org. We also have a Telegram, and holo.host, and scepter.org, which is what Holochain is intended to evolve into. And there's some videos on my YouTube, which I don't have time for. And this is the last one. So yeah, I'll take 1 or 2 more questions. I think you were first in the back.
Oh, no, I
Okay.
So previously in past prior career, I was playing a very zero-sum game that was very much oriented around like extrinsic rewards, and like it was like there was a lot of mimicry. It was very much like very capitalist. So now, like thinking about this kind of future world of abundance, where where we have these like shared mythologies with other people, that just seems really fun. Is that, and it seems much more grounded in like this enjoyable shared experience. Am I on the right track of like what I'm imagining this world looks like? Is this?
I think so. More fun than the mimicry.
Yeah. It sounds way more fun.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, and the key turning point will be when these stories switch from like playing Harry Potter in the neighborhood to like hacking things and then also calling yourself a wizard. So like when we can reify these mythic roles as real life roles is when we can bring magic back into the world for the public. And that is the point that I call the kitten wars, when we start to have weird public cultural battle over these definitions. I think you were first.
Please correct me if I'm misrepresenting your views. But it seems to me that at least part of what you're getting at is that in order for humans to have any meaning in post-capitalist world, it needs to be one that we invent, which seems to suggest that once we have abundance, like that won't be enough for us. Like we'll need something else to give our lives meaning. Like reality will no longer be meaningful enough. It seems like, for one, I would strongly go against the idea that simply reality is not enough for people. And then two, I can see a huge strife if two groups, myth-making, go against each other. Like this is, I mean, I don't want to call it a religious war, but if two people have entirely diametric, belief systems that they create around because they need a belief system to create because, the world isn't enough for them, which, I mean, I guess isn't too crazy of an idea because people have created plenty of myths because reality isn't enough for them.
Yeah.
But, I mean, I see lots of strife.
Like the Sunnis and the Shias, right? The Muslims, right? They are based on a concept that one believes that the cousin was supposed to take over Islam, and the other believes that nephew was supposed to take over Islam, and they're both at each other's throats. So just to follow up on that, is it fractal imposterism? Is it being imposter to an original concept, and then taking that concept and being an imposter to that original imposter, right? And then just infinitely doing imposters of imposters. Is that how you sustain holochain?
That might be a way to look at it. I'd have to talk more about this idea of fractal imposterism.
But how do you prevent religious war?
Yeah. Okay. So. Yeah. I mean, I think
solve it today, folks.
how
We're
to
gonna
start
solve it
religious
today.
war. Okay. So. First of all, I think that yes, a lack of meaning in life is a real existential threat, and this is why people get so absorbed in things like Netflix and fantasy world and all of these things. Some people to escape, they don't have enough, and some people, once they have enough, to escape the boredom that they don't have any meaningful actions. So like action and meaning, I think, are closely related, and creating meaningful actions. And then, what was the second half of your question? I always forget the other half.
Two people. So if we decide that we're going to create a world for ourselves, give ourselves meaning, and if people's worldviews that they accept are different.
Cool. Okay. So yeah. So actually, this is something that I think, if there's like one thing that's like genuinely new or special that's coming out of this whole movement, it's that it's eventually consistent myth-making. So the whole thing is about contagion and counter-contagion, and if you're trying to mimic something or simulate something, you end up taking it in and creating rhizomatic connections that create massive spread and contagion of ideas. And part of the trick here is doing it without homogenization. But I think that these types of holy wars are actually going to become less and less common as it becomes more inescapable to also know your opponent's point of view.
Just a quick interjection. So the people who do want to take a break, feel free to do that. We are already quarter past. So, but we can still continue to make questions.
So it's inconsequential holy wars.
Sorry?
So,
It's kind of Flame Wars online.
yeah, I mean, so it's interesting, right? If the Sunnis and the Shias did fight, and one, if that's an example of a finite game, and one, there was, all the Shias were annihilators, and you had only Sunnis. The next preceding game would be like a resurrection game.
Yeah.
Is that kind of like
But
the
they
concept?
fight in physical space. Like we're
That is-
talking
they
about,
fight in the
like
physical-
digital,
correct.
like information space.
So this
right?
is inconsequential holy wars.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I think let's do this first.
If you haven't.
So I'm just struck by you're intending to create games for the sake of seeking meaning, but is there actually a pro-social agenda in terms of physical space? A lot of capitalism, for all its problems, still achieves social value in the process of destruction. Simply playing games simply burns energy.
Yeah.
So
This is a fantastic question. Yeah, and absolutely, I have an explicit. It's not. I'm not going to try and like put out my activist agenda for everyone, but I personally have explicit things I want to do in activism. Holo, I'm actually kind of trying to form Xeno and Holo as like two things that are intricately mapped. So I want to have kind of a mythic component to different types of activism, and then create those ties more and more strongly. For me, it's explicitly trying to help people, and the manner in which it helps people is replicating abundance. And so I see this as Holo Salesforce. Once we actually have Holochain and like kind of a Holo marketplace of some kind, like something like Amazon, except to be a bunch of little Amazons put together in one interface, then having, if you have like a small kickback for people who install this on someone's new computer or do that, like all that money that corporations are siphoning off for their profits gets to go to the people who are spreading this to the edges, and those are the gamers, those are the deckers who have their decks of interesting games and upgrades who invite you to weird parties.
Yeah, so that sounds beautiful, and it's exciting. I would to dig deeper on this sort of the worldview issue. So we talked about like sort of like the Sunni and Shia. I mean, another concrete example where memes played out in terms of diametric worlds was like the recent U.S. election. You know, and that was one where, I mean, I think you could potentially make a case that there's like an optimistic narrative there, though there's a lot of people who would say that that's a very negative experience in like the American story. So I was just like curious to your thoughts there, because it seems like, I mean, that's where people are creating memes, and there are consequences to like people having different worldviews and like throwing them at each other in ways that wasn't possible before, kind of being connected as we are today.
Yeah, I agree. The Trump story is extremely dichotomous, and you can interpret it as the easy way, which is super abysmal, horrible American politics that has never been this bad, or you can interpret it like the 4chan way, which is anonymous as, what's it called, graded, trolled. There's a third word that's better. When you overfill polls, like that 4chan rated the Time Magazine Person of the Year poll, and they got Moot, the creator of 4chan, as the #1 on the slot from voting. But Time Magazine was smart enough to redo its poll when they did that. But when the anonymous movement trolled the U.S. election and got a fake candidate into the office, the U.S. government did not have the security measures in place to prevent this type of hacking of its system. So basically, in my point of view, or like the weird point of view, the non-mainstream point of view, 4chan has, or Anonymous rather, has like taken over the United States effectively. And that could be seen as something positive. But in the short term, obviously quite negative for a lot of people.
So, would this just enable more of that? Would this kind of holochain, would that just enable more of this?
Yes, but in a highly coordinated fashion. Like the reason we got stuck with someone like Trump is that there's not actually a decision-making mechanism to choose a good candidate that exists. But with holochain, we can start to build alternative, really complex, rich tools for reputation and for choosing candidacy, or it could be with other platforms too. But if you actually create these tools to make the collective intelligence more expressive in what it can express, then I think that people will use those tools to do more complex things than Donald Trump. Maybe one or two more questions? I think there was one over here. No? Okay, cool. Thank you so much.
Thank you.